Friends and enemies, welcome to yet another edition of the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast. I'm Len the Legend, and I'm going to be joined by Shay just momentarily. And he is currently in, well, I'll let him explain where he's located just in case I don't want to dox exactly where he is, but he's definitely not in Canada. But because of where he's located, the connection is not 100%. So there's a little bit of a delay between he and I when we speak. So just keep that in mind when you listen in or watch into this interview. And it's going to be a good one because he hasn't been on a podcast before. This is another one. 2 weeks in a row, we're popping the cherries of people on their podcasting tour. And so this is going to be good. He's very highly recommended by somebody Joey and I know quite well. And because of that, we basically roll out the red carpet and want to bring him on. He's very bright, very intelligent, and I want to hear his thoughts on a number of different things. But before I bring on Shay and talk to him, there's two things I got to check off my list of things to do. Number one, sponsor reads. Well, those are the two things I got to do. But ECDNS is our first sponsor. They've been with us for a number of years. I think it's probably now 3 years they've been with us, 2-3 years, whatever it is. It seems like forever because we've had a really good relationship with EasyDNS. You could do domain name registries with them. You could do web hosting. You could do email hosting. A lot of different options over there. They're privacy focused. And then furthermore, their domain sure services, it prevents you if you do have a website. There's a lot of people out there that are trying to rip off other people by making websites that are relatively close to something, and then through spoofing and shit like that, they're just ripping people off and using your hard work and your name against you. And domain sure pretty much prevents that. So it stops the spoofing, it stops the corruption, stops all the crap at the source, which is really good. But what else could you do with the EasyDNS? You could also get some, well, you could spin up a Nostr relay if you want using their services. You could do a Bitcoin node if you wanted to. A lot of different things you could do over there. But best of all, you could pay with Bitcoin, right? Like Bitcoin, using that as a medium of exchange is something we should be doing. I'm guilty of not doing it enough, but EasyDNS will be happy to take your Bitcoin. But EasyDNS, if you do happen to sign up with them, use our promo code CBP Media. By doing so, it will take off 50% off your initial purchase. So you might as well load it up. Buy a bunch of things for your first month because that way you're going to maximize your saving. Check it out. EasyDNS.com. Use our promo code CBP Media. Second sponsor is Bull Bitcoin. Bull Bitcoin, a great place to buy Bitcoin, great place to sell Bitcoin. It's 104K, so I'm not sure if you're happy to buy or sell. Either way, they'll be happy to facilitate that transaction either on-chain or through Lightning. You could do either way. Fees are still ridiculously cheap, still do on-chain. And other things you could do with Bull Bitcoin, you could buy gift cards, so you can start spending your Bitcoin. And like I said, using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange and start spending your Bitcoin indirectly in the real world. And the second thing you could do with them, you could pay your bills using their bill service, and you could pay with your Bitcoin. So you have like a credit card payment or whatever, you could pay with your Bitcoin. Cool stuff. So open an account. If you do that using a referral link below, the fees are going to be reduced by 0.25% in perpetuity. So it makes sense to do that, especially if you're going to buy lots of Bitcoin moving forward. And that's it. That's our rad reads. I hope you enjoyed that part. So let's bring on the man of the hour, Shay. Hopefully your connection is still going strong.
Yeah, hopefully.
How's it going over there, Shay? Yeah.
Good. How about you?
I'm wonderful, man. I'm wonderful. And I didn't say exactly where you're located, just in case you don't want me to say where you're located.
Oh, that's all good. I'm back in Canada now.
Okay.
Yeah.
But typically you're where? Are you like a world traveler, or are you just a homebody always in Canada?
Lately, the last few years, I've been traveling around a bit and spending most of my time in Mexico through the winters. But I've made my way to El Salvador a couple times and through Guatemala. So it was interesting to see the Bitcoin culture down there. That's really nice.
I'm going to pick your brain about El Salvador, Guatemala, and Mexico in just a moment. But before we go any further, I want to inform everyone, who the heck is Shay? Like, give us a little bit of background who you are, and maybe how you got into Bitcoin.
Yeah. I'm born and raised Canadian from British Columbia. And I used to work as an industrial electrician for over 10 years. And then I got into Bitcoin in 2020. In the summer of 2020, I had heard about it like everybody hears about it in the background, and it was on my radar. And then what really got me, of course, was the mining aspect of it. And so, of course, with mining, it connects energy and money, and I didn't really understand economics at the time much, and so that took me down the rabbit hole pretty quick. um, and from there, I was just kind of obsessed or consumed by it, like everybody seems to be when they learn about it. Um, and then I started traveling um, in the last few years, and yeah, it's nice to see the other cultures and how they've adopted it and how they view it, because Bitcoin is one of those things that it can be viewed however you are. You'll see Bitcoin the way that you are from your perspective, I think.
2020 was a notable year for a lot of people, and it opened up a lot of people's eyes to numerous things. And did you, after, was this your introduction to Bitcoin? Was that after COVID? Like, I will say after COVID, I'm going to say after March 2020, because that's when the economies worldwide seem to have shut down. So were you jumping into Bitcoin after that moment or before it?
Yeah, after that, around August, I think it came on my radar around then. Yeah.
Right. And it was picking up a lot of steam, and a lot, basically, so a lot of things were picking up steam just because of all the new liquidity that was in the market, and the money had to park somewhere, and part of it ended up in Bitcoin's lap. And so the price pumped quite a bit. Now, being an industrial electrician and your interest in mining, you're mentioning is quite high. Do you dabble in mining at all?
No,
Bitcoin
I
mining, I'm
never.
talking about.
Yeah, I never got into the actual mining part of it, but the concept of it, that's what really drove my interest. Just the fact that we don't usually associate money with energy anymore, even though we should, because it is the input to everything. All of our experiences are energy over time, and for some reason, as a culture, we've forgotten that. Yeah.
So what's the disconnect? Like, how could we bring people into the realm of energy being money? Because for whatever reason, that's no longer the case. But given what's going on in the world, we see that money is being quote unquote printed, and inflation is up. People's purchasing power is getting wrecked as a result, not just in developing nations, but even in the United States, Canada, and other G7 nations. So what's preventing us from crossing that gap and having people understand that energy is money?
Well, I mean, for myself, I naturally thought in systems thinking, like for troubleshooting and everything. I see things as a system, and so when I learned about Bitcoin mining, I would look at a regular plug in the wall, and we purchase electricity, but we can't sell it back unless we create some complex contract with that um, monopoly, um, the service provider. And when Bitcoin mining shows up on the scene, you can see that it creates a bidirectional, like it's a two-way function. And so when you use systems thinking, if you have bidirectionality, you have to expand your lens to see both sides of the system if there's um, that aspect. And if you look at history, this is what's kind of interesting to me, is if you look at how we usually evolve, we kind of kludge together, like we kind of fumble through every evolution in technology, and we just make everything work. And so we have a lot of standards that are inefficient, that we always have to go and create interfaces that are backwards compatible until we reach a point where the standard gets so top heavy that it collapses under the weight, and you have to rebuild the standard. And so in this case, this is what's happened with the fiat dollar, is we've just associated and had the medium drift for a long time. And so we've kind of lost the message of value underneath it that's usually correlated with it. And so when I look back, and you can look as like with the perspective of Bitcoin now, you can see that the problem that it solves is basically that you've got energy over time that it's a dynamic. It's a hard to track because it's always changing. So the market is always changing the subjective price of energy all over the world. And so to track that, you need everybody on board. So it's a bit of a paradox because Bitcoin right now is not actually tracking the price of energy. I mean, it is with quite a lag, but what would actually solve that is if everybody believed that it was, right? So money is a shared abstraction. We have to believe it to make it valuable.
Will we get to a point if there's mass adoption, not just with using Bitcoin, but even using energy to mine Bitcoin? Does that create a problem in the future where then the consumer, such as you or I, may not get access to the electricity that's being produced? And because that electricity is being diverted for something that is potentially more lucrative, in this case, Bitcoin mining, and that shuts us out from getting access to 24/7 electricity. Because that's what I wonder in the future, that because as electricity prices continually go down through efficiencies and the price of Bitcoin goes up, I know mining also gets more challenging too, and there's the halving and all that just makes mining much more challenging. But still, the fact that you could monetize electricity, I'm wondering if the electric companies are going to look at, gee, I can make more selling it using it to mine Bitcoin by then selling it to an end consumer. Do you think this is going to be a problem for us moving forward?
No, I think that at first there was some instances where you were getting certain, like because of the price is volatile, you can get peaks where and troughs where the price could start to move in on other producers, but in general, it's so competitive that it's going after the lowest priced energy, basically waste energy and stranded energy, which I think it's counterintuitive for most people because we think of the energy grid as basically efficient on the back end, but it's extremely inefficient because we have to build out infrastructure far beyond what the amount that we use every day because we have to build it up to the peak demand. And so if you have, I mean, I'm sure you've heard about it, but you have a duck curve. So in the morning when people use lots of energy and then they go to work, they use less energy, and then in the evening they use more. And because you have to supply those peak demands, you've got, a large empty gap in the middle where there's nobody buying. And the energy grid is still there sitting. And it's essentially anything that's not used in real time is wasted because they don't have the storage for that. It's not set up that way. Bitcoin basically acts as a capacitor, much like a battery does, for load balancing. It's pretty fascinating because it actually solves more problems on the back end, and it's probably going to be one of the things that helps with, climate change and all of the efficiencies use of energy going forwards.
But I thought Bitcoin was going to be boiling the oceans. How could it be? I'm kidding. You mentioned waste energy that is stranded energy, essentially. I'm not sure if you studied this enough, but I'm curious if you have any idea what is the majority of stranded energy right now. Like, in my head, I think it is flared gas. It's gas that is being wasted on oil fields because it's just so far away from anywhere, and there's no way that you could monetize that energy normally. So that's, well, Bitcoin you can. So is that the majority of the stranded energy that is out there, or is there something else that I'm missing?
I myself haven't run the numbers on it, so I don't know the total amounts. But I think if you go beyond just the energy side, because there's massive amounts of waste energy. I worked in the gas industry before, where they with flare stacks, where they would burn off sour gas, and so the same thing. You're basically burning all of this energy that could be run through a turbine, and then you could monetize it, and it would clean it. And that Bitcoin wasn't there at the time, or the infrastructure for all of this, but now it's happening more and more, especially in Canada, where you can create these, CCANs full of Bitcoin miners and a gen set where they can send them out. But one of the, I think, things that we don't talk about enough in the Bitcoin community is all of the waste in plain sight. I think some people have mentioned it, but it's like if you've got monetary premiums sitting on cars, houses, everything that is basically being used as a store of value, if you give something or you put something into the market that can store value better and take that monetary premium out of those, then those things can become less of a store of value and more of a utility again. And most of what we use or have is not being used 100% of the time. So the frequency is extremely low. So I think it will increase the frequency of use of all of these things sitting idle in our day-to-day life.
Well, and how about governments? Do you think that they're going to be adversarial for some sort of adoption of Bitcoin in this regard? Because it seems like any sort of adoption of Bitcoin is at the detriment of the fiat currency that they administer. So I'm wondering if governments are going to put up roadblocks moving forward and saying, or at least indirectly try to make it more challenging for Bitcoiners or people to onboard into Bitcoin. What are your thoughts on that?
I think initially they have, but governments are made up of individual people like you and me. And once you run the numbers and you see the science and the math, they work. It works. Then they can't really argue with that. And I see it more like if you've ever, read The Internet of Money by Andreas Antonopoulos. You can think of the idea of the medium and the message. Once you separate the message from the medium, for example, I like to use the example of the copyright industry because I'm a millennial. And I watched the copyright industry kind of get disrupted in real time, and you get to see the message, which was the music, be digitized and stripped from the medium of CDs and anything that could be copywritten. And then, of course, we pirated all of our music for a while there. And then what happened? Well, you broke the monopoly on that copyright industry, and they capitulated and they went to subscriptions. And so they repackaged that message and they gave you the benefit of, all the music you could want for a subscription fee, along with the ability to interface with it and share it with friends and do all sorts of other social things to change the message a little bit. And so Andreas Antonopoulos points this out, and he says that we always mistake this cycle. And I would say that this is going to happen much like that with Bitcoin, because once you strip the medium of value from the message of value from the medium, then governments are going to have to change and capitulate, because it's essentially the sovereign individual thesis, where all money will flow out of the country if you're hostile towards it and you're going to tax it, compared to other countries that might not. So it inverts the tragedy of the commons, because everybody's sitting on real estate, and with real estate, you don't have optionality. You're there sitting there getting taxed over and over again. But with Bitcoin, it is not attached to the medium, and so it can flow across borders, and they will start to realize this, which I think they are. And this is why I think we're close to a tipping point where you have the nation state game theory play out, where it inverts from the tragedy of the commons until those monopolies on property rights are flipped, and then they change to, much like, I guess, Balaji, he talks about like the network state, if you've heard about that. So that's the idea that you would subscribe to as a citizen. And I think that we're just around the corner from something similar to that.
And I just want to double back. Were you old enough, or are you old enough to remember the Napster days? Were you alive? Were you around? Were you cognizant at that time? Were you involved with the
Yeah,
Napster days?
my brothers were playing with that a bit, but I remember streaming music on BitTorrent or uTorrent and all that.
And that is a shining example of what happens with decentralization. It's impossible to stop that type of service because there's no central entity that is providing it. It's merely peer to peer. That's where Bitcoin is kind of another example. So I look at that, the BitTorrents and everything along those lines, and compared to Bitcoin, there's a lot of similarities between the two of them. And it seems like to me, there's no stopping it. Governments could put restrictions, they could put up whatever roadblocks they want, but it really will just be more, if anything, temporary and maybe just a little bit of short-term pain for Bitcoiners. In the end, there's no way to stop this. Capital flight will happen regardless. They may stop it a little bit, but I think in the end it will just happen regardless. There's just no way to stop this. Now, what we had in Canada, I'm not sure if you followed it. We had an election not too long ago. Where did you follow our Canadian election?
Yeah, I did.
Uh-oh,
I
oh.
voted as well.
I
Yeah,
don't. Okay,
it's
perfect. So, are you?
I don't really
Oh, I think
subscribe
we're
to
losing.
the political, like, politics won't fix it. I think that it's a little deeper than politics.
But Carney, I'm looking at Mark Carney, our current prime minister.
Can you still hear me there?
Yeah, I could hear you. It's cutting in and out, but I think it's stabilized now. But with respect to Carney, our prime minister, I think he's a known Bitcoin, and I'm going to paraphrase here. I'm not trying to put words in his mouth or anything, but I don't think he's a fan of Bitcoin. And I'm just wondering what's going to be done moving forward with respect to Canadian laws, Canadian policies, regulations towards Bitcoin. I don't think anything's going to happen, but still, with somebody in power that doesn't align well with Bitcoin, I mean, at least that's the way I understand it. I just wonder if things could change moving forward with how we deal with Bitcoin in Canada. Any thoughts on that? Oh, do we lose you? Oh no, I think we lost Shay. Right in the middle of our political discussion, too. I was going to get deep into politics.
Of energy, like I'm. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's really
Hopefully you
lagged
can hear
now.
me
I think it's
still.
about 20 seconds or so.
Uh-oh.
You may want to cut off and come back in, and we could try. Oh man,
Can you hear me now?
ladies and gentlemen, yeah, I could hear you. I think it's just very, very lagged. So yeah, I'm sorry about this, folks.
Yeah.
Just
if you can't hear me, I'll just stay around then.
Yeah, just log in and log off and log back in. Hopefully that will resolve the issue. But shoot, we're just getting deep into politics, and you know what? For everybody that watches this show and listens in, it's one of the things I love to discuss. I love to dive into because it has shaped our lives here in Canada. Even though it's very difficult to participate, it seems like it's a system for the in crowd, and I'm definitely not in. I'm anything but that. But still, I like it's like a drama for me. Some people like to watch stuff on Netflix. They binge watch videos on Netflix. Some people like to just watch movies. I like to watch politics for whatever reason, specifically Canadian politics. But Shay, are you still there? Oh man, I think we might have lost him. Let me just, yeah, he just jumped out. Let me just see if I can bring him back in. You there, Shay? No, you know what? I think this is done. Oh man.
Okay, can you hear me now? Let's see
I could
if
hear
I'm
you.
back on.
Could you hear me okay?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, sorry about these
it's
connection issues.
It's okay. No, it's very delayed. We'll just do with what we can do. I was asking you the question to do with the Canadian politics because we have Carney now elected, and he doesn't seem to be all that friendly to do with Bitcoin. So, is there going to be, in your eyes, you think there's going to be anything that's going to make it more challenging for Bitcoiners moving forward with Carney now as a prime minister?
Right. Yeah, I like to see this as that narrative follows energy or price in this case, because the price is a reflection of the energy behind it lagging. And I think that as time goes on, no politician is going to be able to argue against the adoption of Bitcoin when nation states start adopting it. I think that you can look at it more like a scaling conflict or scaling issue, like we know about in Bitcoin. Everybody's always arguing about scaling, how to scale properly. And I see this, if you zoom out and you look at how society has scaled, I think that you can see just money in general as a scaling solution. And as it fails, people start to go back and argue about, socialism, capitalism, etc. And Bitcoiners, they say Bitcoin fixes it. And I think that that's what we're going to see going forwards, is that nation states are going to start competing. And then if you're a nation state that doesn't compete, your citizens will start to leave the country and take their wealth with them.
Now, with nation states, does it seem like we've taken a step backwards? Because El Salvador, up until recently, was the only nation out there where you could potentially spend your Bitcoin, and it was accepted within their borders. But now they made a deal with the IMF, and they're no longer allowing people to pay taxes to the state with Bitcoin, and they're having vendors make it an option if they want to accept Bitcoin. So this seems to be a step back. Now, does that mean it's going to be a little bit longer before we have another state decide to do the same thing? Because the IMF, they obviously dislike Bitcoin, and the countries that are going to do something like this are going to be developing nations that are going to be using the services of the IMF. So how do we get over this hurdle?
I think that all arose because they went a little too fast. I don't really think that they needed to make it legal tender. They could have just said we're not going to tax it and just let people adopt it as it is, as it's an open source tool. And I think that is the way that it will be right now. And I don't think we need their permission. I bet money is a language. This is what I subscribe to. And if you go to Guatemala, they use it as a currency there in that circular economy. They still use it in El Salvador. I don't think that the government is being completely honest, because, I mean, it looks like they're still stacking Bitcoin, even though the IMF deal says that they can't stack Bitcoin. That's a hard one, and I don't pay attention too much to the politics on that side of it, but it's still happening. The adoption is happening. The other place, small country, Suriname, I think that would probably be the next one to look at. I mean, adoption's happening in circular economies all over, but from the top down, that might be the next top down, unless we see acceleration in the U.S. doing the reserve, and then everybody gets the go ahead to adopt.
I have a sneaky suspicion the U.S. is probably going to put Trump coin on the reserves before they put Bitcoin. I don't know if that's the case. But with respect to Suriname, there's a political candidate. I'm not sure, and I think it's a she. I could be wrong.
Yeah, Maya is her name, I think. Yeah.
And is she running for like top office, either president or prime minister, or is she running for something?
As far as I know, I think it's for presidency. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, and she's very fond of Bitcoin, so that's a good. We don't talk a lot of Suriname, but yeah, that is potentially one that could be the next one that does it. And you mentioned Guatemala, and you've traveled to Guatemala. You mentioned, so how is Bitcoin being used over there, and is it improving people's lives?
Yeah, it was interesting to see, because there's it's known as Bitcoin Lake, Panajachel. It's a town with around 17 other small towns around the lake, and Panajachel is the main one that you arrive to. And so there's a community leader, circular economy. He's organizing it and teaching at the local schools. And so we got to meet up with him. His name's Eliasar. He's a great guy, and he toured us around, and we got to sit in some of his classes. and see it. And I think there's about 60 to 80 places that currently accept Bitcoin and rising every day because he works full time on the project, and it's quite something. Everything it's all about education, and I think that's why I see it as a language, right? You can't just start speaking it. You have to spend some time and translate back and forth and figure it all out and see how to incorporate it and how it'll fit into your life. But yeah, it's pretty incredible to see. You don't really have to. There's not as much unlearning in the North America. We have to unlearn and convince people that there's a problem. But there, if you talk about corruption or anything like inflation, they already know it's a problem. So it's pretty much just the learning aspect. It's not unlearning.
Are they more inclined to use a US stablecoin because the US dollar does retain its value relatively well compared to other fiat currencies? And I ask this because in that neck of the woods, a lot of people are living from hand to mouth, so they don't have the ability to put away any sort of savings. They basically whatever they earn is basically used for feeding themselves for a day or for paying for shelter or whatever. So is that causing people to use stable coins more than Bitcoin?
Not as far as I've seen, but I've heard that people prefer them in other countries. There, he was primarily Bitcoin focused, and he was pretty adamant with his education as well because he understands Bitcoin, and they don't really. Once they're looking at a digital unit of currency, they're probably either going to be in their local currency or Bitcoin. But it's yeah, I think that stablecoins will play their part in this transition, but I don't see if we get to this tipping point. I think that if you don't have large drawdowns, and I see it more as a technology adoption cycle where you usually get an S curve. So at a certain point, I don't think we see so much of an effect on the cycles. And as people see it gradually and they understand the issue more, there'll be less volatility to for them to deal with. So I think that why would you want to hold a so-called stable coin? What's not really stable, right?
Now, in terms of having Bitcoin get into the country, I think a lot would probably be through remittances and along those lines. But that may not be stable for long run. And so maybe, and I'm going to tap into your past as working in the electrical field and as an electrician, mining Bitcoin over there. I'm not sure exactly these developing nations if they have excess electricity, but that would be if they have the ability to generate electricity for cheap. Would be one way to accumulate Bitcoin and do it on just with very little effort. Just simply set up some sort of power generation station, set up a mining rig, a few or a bunch of mining rigs, and then away you go. Do you see that being as a future for a lot of these countries out there, specifically like Guatemala, Mexico, and to a lesser extent El Salvador, because they seem to have shelved their ideas to like do their mining with the Bitcoin, the what is it, the volcano shit. So like, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I haven't been up to date on their volcano mining, but in Guatemala, I mean, at least with Eleazar, there's actually a video, Get Based, I think, did a documentary there, and they showed him mining Bitcoin with cooking oil, like used cooking oil, that would otherwise be thrown out.
Yeah,
And so
I
he
saw
has
that
that diesel
video.
generator. Yeah, so he's got that diesel
Yeah.
generator set up. It wasn't working when we went there. Sadly, I think they had an issue with the starter or something. But I I didn't get to see that. But I know that they were running and mining that, and it just goes to show how much waste energy is kicking around out there, and we don't think about it because originally there was no way to monetize this stuff. Um, but yeah, I think that it will gain traction bit by bit.
It's going to take a lot of effort for people, plebs like you in particular, to go out there and educate folks on how to do this. So
Can you still hear
I'm
me
like, it
there? Or is
just
there a
seems
bit
like
of a lag?
it's a bit of a lag. But no, it's fine. I just it's now comes to a point where we just have to educate folks on how to set up mining operations, and that can be a little tricky. And initially, like, it seems rather simplistic, but still there is some level of maintenance that needs to be done. You got to make sure that all the equipment is running. If there is some breakdown, say a fan or a hash board is down, they have to have some technical knowledge to keep things running at peak efficiency. So it's I think it's incumbent on us to teach people how to do it and to get them up and running. Is it's similarly in, because you spend time in Mexico, or is, like, what's the situation over there with, oh shoot, I lost you. Oh, Shay, we lost him again. Oh man. So sorry about this, ladies and gents. This is because his connection is spotty right now. He is using the Wi-Fi off his phone, so he's tethering off his phone. He initially tried to use the Wi-Fi available at his residence to connect in, but it was not very stable at all. And initially, we had even using the video, but it just wasn't working. So I told him just turn off the video. We'll go audio only. And he's back. You back, Shay? Uh oh. I
Trying to
think we're
get
still
back
having some.
on here.
Oh,
Can you
this
hear me now?
it's yeah, it's super lagged and the connection's not 100%. Oh, let's just
Yes.
plow through this thing, because you spent a lot of time in Mexico,
Mhm.
and maybe you could talk us up, like, whereabouts in Mexico were you located, and maybe you could talk about the Bitcoin economy over there.
Yeah. So the last 2 seasons I was in Jalisco, like near Puerto Vallarta, and I spent 1 season up in Mazatlan. And so my girlfriend's actually from Mazatlan. We were traveling down to El Salvador and Guatemala, and so she's started to see what kind of interest there is there, and started a circular economy, Puerto Bitcoin in Mazatlan. And so she's starting to do monthly meetups just to see what kind of interest, and help educate people from uh, the basics. And so it's great. Pablo from Bull Bitcoin was helping us organize some of that, and it's great. It's
Oh, Pablo's the gem. Now, A2K Nexus on YouTube is asking, "Are you hiring?" Laugh out loud. So if I'm not sure if you are, but if you are hiring folks over there, he may be interested in joining up. So is there any opportunity for expansion?
Yeah, we're not really running much of a business. The one business that we did start is a clothing business, because my girlfriend, she makes clothing for a living, custom clothing, and she has a clothing shop.
Banana Tree
And so
Clothing
when we went
Company.
down to El Salvador and Guatemala, that's right, yeah, yeah, exactly. And so lately we've shipped some hats down to sell at Mi Premier Bitcoin and the Bitcoin hardware store in El Zonte. Um, and so that's pretty much it. But sadly I can't hire anybody for doing all that stuff. That's just starting, and but I love the interest. I'm sure if you visit any circular economy, they'd love to just meet you and spread the knowledge. Right? It's great.
So with the folks that you're talking to down there and trying to educate them on a Bitcoin, what sort of way are you having them secure their Bitcoin? Are you having them install Blue Wallet on their phone or something else? Because you're starting from scratch with people's knowledge, and they could easily screw something up. So I'm curious what tools you're using over there to have people store their Bitcoin.
Well, initially they're small amounts, and so to get people started within minutes, it's always been the easiest is just onboarding them onto Lightning wallets, custodial Lightning wallets like Wallet of Satoshi, obviously Bitcoin Beach, Bitcoin Jungle. They're great. I like Bitcoin Beach and Bitcoin Jungle. They've got that learn to earn option on there, so it's in Spanish as well, right? So you learn about Bitcoin and you earn some satoshis on the way, and it's great to get people to see it, because for them, um, that's the interfaces have to be built out for user. The UX has to be nice and easy to use. For custodial, that comes a little later, and I'm hoping that we'll see more Lightning wallets incorporate self-custody, which I'm not sure. I saw a few things on Wallet of Satoshi pop up, but I haven't seen them actually incorporate it into their wallets. But yeah, it's a long process.
Does a Phoenix wallet has? I haven't used Phoenix wallet in a long time, but I'm wondering if the application has something to allow you to do some sort of custodial holding of your Lightning. Because the only way I know it right now is you have to run your own full node, your own Bitcoin node, and then on top of that, your own Lightning node. And through there is where that's the way I always learned it. Is that's the way custodial Lightning is done. But yeah, it's got to be the easier. They got to find easier ways of doing this because it's challenging to run your own node.
Yeah, lately actually, Bull Bitcoin and Aqua Wallet are great because they kind of created a stack where you can use Lightning to Liquid and then go right on chain for low fees. And I think I think Bitcoin's price is holding back a lot of innovation, because once the price goes up and people get pretty excited about it, you're going to see engineers chase those opportunities and create the interface. Like goes back to the innovation cycles where the interfaces have to meet somewhere in the middle with education, right? Right now we're spending more time on education and less time on interfaces, but when the interfaces come out, then we'll see kind of, it's like the Internet of Money thing.
It's the thing that I always thought it to be. The easier it gets to use, the less likely you're going to be holding on to your coin. It's going to be somebody else that's going to be maintaining it. But yeah, the UX certainly has to improve, because you're seeing it. You're trying to onboard folks on a Bitcoin that probably have some technical knowledge, I'm guessing, and then you're trying to use this magic internet money and using the interfaces that are available to us right now. That's got to be a huge challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's gotten a lot easier, really. But again, people, once they notice that the price goes up, especially in a bull run, they're reluctant to spend that Bitcoin without, unless you tell them you can replace it and they've got an easy way to purchase Bitcoin or source it out. They understand that they want to hold on to this stuff too. And so I think we have to reach that point where the overlay of the Bitcoin network, as a monetary medium, has to kind of go on to the clunky rails of the fiat rails and the banking rails, and this is what we're seeing now is the sailors bringing Bitcoin into the fiat world in many ways.
Yeah, he's really making Bitcoin a topic on Wall Street, but I've talked about him at length of my concerns with him. I don't think he's a spook or anything. It's just, man, you have the ability to secure your own Bitcoin. You don't need somebody else to custody it for you. You have the chops, do it, and also if without even doing that, let's at least first provide us addresses for what you own, so there's proof that you own it. But that's a topic for another time. I just want to talk about scaling, because that's something else you mentioned, and I hope that maybe we could do a deep dive into this, because one of the difficult things with Bitcoin to really just to wrap my head around is how it's going to be used as more people onboard it, because layer one is not efficient enough to have billions of people use it. And even another option out there like Lightning doesn't allow us to adopt billions of people, because again, layer one, it's only limited to how big the block size, maximum 4 megabytes. So it creates a problem about scalability. And with Bitcoin, I mean, what are your thoughts on how we're going to be addressing this issue?
Well, I look at like what Jeff Booth is doing. He's leading the way, investing into companies that are on top of Bitcoin, and that's a great example, I guess, with Fedi and all those. But I think like I just, I finished reading The Internet of Money again. Like I've read it a few times, but he talks about scaling. Andreas Antonopoulos, he talks about scaling in there, and he references the way that the internet scaled, back when there was a couple web pages and that was the internet, right? And just it happened in basically cycles, and everybody would always say, there's no way to scale this. And then there was always some way to find a workaround to scale it because humans are innovative. And so I see this happening over and over again. And as the need for it increases, and the money's there to create that, and there's an opportunity in the marketplace, I think that I've got a lot of faith in the marketplace and human innovation to overcome all the scaling issues. I can't say I know exactly how they're going to do it, but I see that there's going to be the incentives aligned for it.
The one thing I fear is there's going to be people that are going to try to take advantage, and there'll be scammers and shit like that, and they'll try to propose something and push something that may appear on the surface to be something that works and it's good for the masses, but in the end, there's some ulterior motive that's behind their moves, and that's the one thing that when I see something, I try to look at it with a skeptical eye. That's just I'm always a glass half full kind of guy, I guess. Especially what's happened the last few years. My faith in a lot of things has been just whittled away to like just a nub. It's brutal. But before we wrap stuff our talk here up, I just want to mention something. You talked about Mimemetrics. Did I say that right? Mimemetrics? Or
Mimetics.
Mimetic. What is mimetic?
So mimetics, the term mimetics, or the meme, was coined by Richard Dawkins in his book The Selfish Gene.
We're losing you again.
And it was a metaphor of the metaphor for the selfish gene. So it was a metaphor of a metaphor. But
oh no, we're losing you, Shay.
It became, oh, hopefully you can hear.
No, it's cutting in and out.
I don't know if I've cut out. I'll keep talking and hope you get the message, but let me know if you're not hearing anything.
I can hear you now.
But the meme,
yeah, I could.
Okay.
Damn, because I'd like to hear this mimetic thing.
Okay, I'll try and log out and log back in here.
All right.
Okay. Okay, if you can hear me, I'll keep talking about the meme.
Yeah, keep going.
No? Okay, so mimetics, the meme, is a cultural unit of information. We pass them around. They're jokes on the internet, and they spread virally. But I've taken this idea of mimetics, and I don't really subscribe to the fact that it was that I think that it predates the gene. Essentially, information existed before the genetics, and I think that the meme is basically just a compression protocol for information, and also that it's a different framework that you can fit a lot of other concepts together. And the big one for me is language and money, because they're often referenced as the same thing, but obviously money is a little bit different. And the connection there, I go into a bit of the psychology, like causation versus correlation, because with the memes drifting in language, you can have something called linguistic drift. So throughout history, language drifts. The syntax, the structure of the words shift, and they form more slang, and the semantics also drifts because the words like nice in the 1800s was something like foolish, and now it's more like pleasant. But that's just one example. And if you broaden the idea of language, you can start to see that everything is essentially language because it's a communication protocol, and it's how we relate to everything. And if you go back to the idea that everything is a protocol, well, then you could say that everything has syntax and semantics and a gradient between them as they change. So they're dynamic systems, so they change over time. And that is, it's always fascinated me because that linguistic drift happens, but there's something called linguistic relativity. And it's the way that language shapes the way that we think. And so the language we use changes how we think. And if you look at the hierarchy of money, money shouldn't be in a hierarchical state. Like it should be a flat network, more like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is peer-to-peer, it's a flat network. But because we've lived in a society with money as a language for so long that is hierarchical, we have incorporated that into our psychology. So our psychology is basically a master-slave system. And so depending on what side of the system you're on, you will have a superiority or inferiority complex. And given your situation, you'll express it that way. And so sadly, we've got an entire culture with these psychological complexes. And it's an interesting framework because once you go into this memetics, it actually it drove me right down to understanding, well, not understanding, but describing awareness as a protocol, which is, another layer. And if you look at that and you take that same example of the syntax, the semantics, and that gradient, you can look at awareness and say, well, that was supposed to be a flat network as well. And the way that it's corrupted, you could say, or compressed, is through your self-concept. So your self-concept is a compression of your awareness, right? And so just like if you speak English or Spanish, you've got different protocols of your awareness, right? To interact with other systems of awareness. And so it gave me a broader framework of understanding not just Bitcoin, but the idea of what opting out is, because it's essentially exercising your ability to have agency again, right? And so most people are actually controlled by their compressed self-concepts, their ego, right? And they're not usually able to opt out of their ego unless the ego, unless they hit a wall where their ego doesn't conceptualize their reality very well, and then they have to break it and rebuild a new ego, or you could awaken and be more aware, and you sit in that state of awareness. So yeah, I've
What
been
brought you into
writing.
this?
Yeah. Well, I read a lot. So Bitcoin is it drove me to read as many books as I could get my hands on, and as it usually does for everybody. But I just wanted to understand things through a systems thinking lens. And once you apply systems thinking is basically the ability to zoom in and zoom out of a system to see the boundaries and change the boundaries. And what I actually saw happening recently, which, reading Richard Dawkins' work and biology and memes and all this, you start to go into seeing patterns. And in psychology, so there's two disruptions that I've noticed that are happening beyond economics. In psychology, about 80 to 100 years of psychology is being disrupted by this lady, you might have heard of her, Lisa Feldman Barrett, and she's kind of leading the way on that. And she's basically applying systems thinking to the brain and her studies. And it's completely opposite of the way that people think, because she describes emotions as something the brain constructs in a predictive way, which goes against all previous thought, because we think there's a spot a place in our brain that says happiness, a place in our brain that says fear, right? It's not like that. It's a emergent phenomenon. And that's pretty profound. But then you go into biology and you see that the same thing is happening with a guy named Dennis Noble, who worked with Richard Dawkins for quite a while, on and off. But he subscribes and he's written books on living systems, and he's basically applying living systems thinking to biology, and that's disruptive because that's going against the gene-centric view. Whereas it's essentially reductionist theories, domains, basically having to expand, because once you see that it's a bidirectional system, right, not just a bottom up, it's like the genes don't cause everything. Because if you took a gene from you and you tried to recreate you couldn't, because it's a path dependent person, right? And so of course there's epigenetics and all of the top down. So it's a bidirectional. And so same thing. So as long as you can zoom out and see that there's this holistic view, then you can't subscribe to those reductionist views. So I see it as all of these things are happening around the same time because we're finally getting a new framework to apply. And so my idea was, why not apply that to, spirituality or religion or awareness, like the things that we want to answer about ourselves, right? And I just wanted to understand all of these things. I'm not specifically religious, but once I see it as a system, I can see these things as placeholders, right? Like and it just makes a lot more sense when I can describe it this way for myself. So I like to write about it for myself.
You're passionate about this. Would you say The Selfish Gene is one of the top 3 books for you?
The Selfish Gene was good, but what struck me was when he mentioned Mimemetrics, and then I realized like it doesn't make sense. That you could come up with this cultural meme and lay it on top of this network and not say that it predated the gene. So I don't. It's a contrarian view, and I don't think the science really incorporates that. But I think it makes more sense for myself, just because you had energy, you had mass, and their information, right? So of course it's going to predate the gene, right?
Yeah.
But as to the book, oh sorry, yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was a good book, but there's some books out there. I can't say I have a favorite book, because each one I go through books extremely fast in order to get a broad idea. I don't really like to dive in too much, because I think that there's a huge benefit to having like the beginner's mind, or like a polymath kind of idea to it, where if you dive too deep into it and you become reductionist, then you're not going to see the broader view. And I think there's the downside of that is you could come off like, what is that, Terrence Howard or somebody, and go and think that you know everything. But I just try and sift through it from first principles as much as possible and go with it.
How fast does it take you to read a book? You say you read pretty quick. I'm curious, like what's an average length of time for a decent sized book?
It depends. I mean, I used to read a lot more. I would train myself or to read or listen to audiobooks 2 to 3 times speed, and sometimes more. But it's just to get through it, because I like to read a few books at a time, and not like deep, right? Of course, if you're listening to it fast, you're going to get. I try and strip the message from the medium essentially, and then at least you've got some part of it to apply. And if you read a few books at a time, then I don't think there's any other way to. You're going to get a different perspective, right?
Paper versus Kindle versus audio, which is the best?
Audio, I think it's the quickest, most convenient. I mean, I like to read paper books, but that's just for the different experience. Yeah.
See, for me, I find the paper to be, I could retain it way better than I could. The Kindle, for whatever reason, is it's the least. It's the one, it's the medium that I could extract the least out of it. Audio is pretty good, but still, for whatever reason, the paper is number one for me. But maybe I'm just different. I don't know. But clearly, when I listen to audio, I'm not doing a 2 or 3x.
Yeah, no, I subscribe to. I don't really like Kindle. I bought Kindle out of convenience when there wasn't other copies available of books. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
yeah.
We're at about an hour, so I just want to respect your time. Plus, I have to go see my wife in just a few minutes, so I got to wrap this
Yeah, no
up.
worries. Whatever works for you. So it's all good.
I appreciate you coming on, number one. But number two, if people want to reach you, because you're a fascinating individual, you have a lot of interesting ideas. How can people reach out to you if they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can message me on, I guess, X at Shaylin Carson. I think it's Shaylin_Carson.
The link
You'll
is below
see.
in the description, so I added that, so
Okay.
it's there. Yeah.
Yeah. So that works pretty well. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold.
Well, Shay, appreciate you coming on, and we popped your podcast cherry, so I hope you enjoyed it. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed it as well. Apologies for the technical difficulties, but we managed to do what we could, and yeah, that's basically it. And we'll be back at this again on Monday. So with that, take care.
Hey, thanks so much, Len.